Sevens, let's talk a little bit about what growth in the gospel looks like for you. As you know, I'm a seven, so I've thought long and hard about this. I want to share with you what I've learned. What we're trying to really ask is, first of all, what does daily discipleship, following Christ, mean? What am I supposed to deny? Deny yourself? What does that mean? Well, as we talked about before, it's denying that self-salvation. See the second verse over there? That basically, that verse, it says, it is trying to save myself. It's that desire to be like God, to provide for myself, to get everything I need, to go on something and be someone significant. Or to more specifically, as we've summarized before, we need to remember that because I become excessive when I'm living for my joy, instead I'm going to deny myself and live from Christ's joy, an abiding joy. Because when that happens, I share that with God and others. I become a joyful force for God and others. Let's get a little more specific. What is happening when going down the average day and all of a sudden I get off the path that God has for me? The rumble strip. I start to hear it. What are those sounds? Well, I become a little bit of a thrill seeker, perhaps. I become scattered. I just can't think straight. I'm impulsive, just making quick decisions. You could call it spontaneous, but it's really impulsive. Narcissistic and unrealistic. Just there's this restlessness in you of more, 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 more. Those times are the rumble strip. It actually does you a favor, though it feels terrible. It drives you nuts. It's actually a favor because it lets you know, hold on a second, I'm really driven by something else right now. Something else is driving me. And I'm trying to ensure my own happiness or joy. Because at these moments, I'm believing that I must find ways to be happy. It's up to me to think through the strategies and the steps of how am I going to get from here to there. I'm relying on my own road. I'm getting off and I'm going to blaze my own trail and I think it's going to work. But it doesn't. And it doesn't. It doesn't work when you try to do it for yourself. But on the other hand, when you're operating from the Christ joy, look what comes out. You're still excited. You're still playful. There's still some spontaneity here. You're carefree and enthusiastic, but you are sobered in your joy. You have your feet on the ground. You're in reality. You're not restless. You're present. You're listening to people. You're not thinking about the future and how you can ensure things will work out so that everything works according to your plan or a series of plans so that we can all be happy, so I can be happy. No, instead I'm present. What is that? Well, I'm going to unpack this with you a little bit. You've got to be convinced. You've got to put an authority in your life that Christ is the source of your joy. Even when you feel trapped. Even when things are boring. Even when things that seem to be a dead end or you're missing out on something. Or you're like, hold on a second. What am I believing in this moment? And if you start to experience the abiding joy of Christ, that comes from relationship with Him, that He's the source of your joy, you can be in the most painful situations and still grow in contentment. Keep your optimism and yet be present to share that joy with others. Well, there's a doctrine called Christus Exemplar, okay? And it's basically built off of God's grace and the fact that He provides for us a path. I keep coming back to Desiring God by John Piper when he says, God is most glorified in us when we're most satisfied in Him. Listen, you have this need to be satisfied, right? It's almost insatiable sometimes. But listen, instead of just telling yourself to chill out, which is not the gospel, go to Christ fully and get satisfied in Him. Have that need met in Him. Believers are given new life through Christ's example. Okay, first of all, you're justified by faith. But in discipleship, what we're talking about is entering into His path with Him. We find joy not just in our happiness, but also through imitating the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. What that means is we are joining with Christ. We are becoming the gospel. Not just believing the gospel, but in sanctification, in our growth, we are becoming more like Him. Death, burial, and resurrection. We're not trying to save ourselves by ensuring our own happiness. We're depending on Him, the vine, John 15, the the ever-growing source of life and joy of grace to come into us. That it was given to us not because we deserved it, but because he gave it to us freely. So it's his gift. And once we're there, we move from believing the gospel to now participating in this death, burial, and resurrection with him. Let me show you what happens normally. You normally think what Dietrich Bonhoeffer would call cheap grace. It's life before Christ. Hey, I believe life after Christ, we're all going to heaven. It's awesome. It starts out with a little bit like, okay, life is a little less awesome. It needs to be more awesome. Life after Christ, man, after I believed that first time, I said I believed that Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sin and rose from the grave. Going to heaven. Everything's good now. It's going to be great. It's going to work out. And you keep avoiding pain, and you keep also missing out on the life in the present moment. What this instead is, a costly grace. If anyone would follow after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Let me say it again. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. So you lose ensuring that you're going to find ways to be happy. You lose ensuring your own happiness, and you trust in his grace, in his life-giving source now. So you step into painful situations, even if it's minor, even if it's just a small irritation. You stop, you say, Christ, I love you more, and your love for me is stronger than my love to ensure my own happiness. My orphan belief system of I must find ways to be happy. I don't love that nearly as much as I love the fact that you care this much for me, to be present with me in this moment. I don't have to be happy right now. I can let go of that. And it can feel like death. It's totally counterintuitive for you to say, I let go of control. I quit driving, pushing hard, blazing my own trail. Instead, I come back on and walk in your path, and the path that goes into pain, and I trust you. And I know you're going to provide for me every step of the way. Let's look at your health. Where are you? How healthy are you? Pause the video if you need to. Examine this page. It pretty much says when you're healthy and you know and trust in Jesus, you find your happiness in him, look at all the things that come out. And on unhealthy, it says when you've forgotten that, abundant life is available and ready in Christ right now. Look what happens. It's unhealthy. Look at the healthy, though, first. You're no longer needing to find fulfillment in the lesser things because your intimacy with God is so strong. You become content in the present moment. You can hear people. You can listen to them. You can be there for them. You can pastor them. You can empathize with them. You can notice things, and you can offer wisdom. You can be effective in your quality of work. You can be grateful and practical and productive in your work. But man, when you're off, look what people are experiencing when you're off. You're fearing missing out on a happier life. They're right there in front of you, and you're like, what am I? Chopped liver? Do you notice me? Fixated on yourself, and when you're pushing to have your needs met, how do people perceive that? When you don't know when to stop, when you're impulsive, and your desire to escape or abuse others, when you feel alone, that's the acting out. It makes a big difference. You have mood swings, impulsive, may spin out of control, and people really experience a different you when you're operating in the old self, when you're operating according to that lie, that orphan belief system, that you've got to find ways to be happy. But man, when Christ is in authority of your life, when the gospel is over you, and God says, I give you grace upon grace upon grace, I am the one that gives you life. I am the one that gives you joy. Happiness is found in me, not in your circumstances. Then you'll say, okay, well then I'll follow you wherever you lead. And God said, this might be tough for you, but I will give you life more deeply than you could ever imagine. And you would no longer fall for that cheap grace anymore. Listen, receive the gospel. Stop right now. Receive the good news that he loves you, that he provides for you, and he's going to walk with you.